In terms of like the last year, I mean, I've seen a lot of it because you share it quite publicly online.
Yeah.
But how has it been for you in particular?
I think it depends on the day. The day you ask me, changes my answer.
Really?
I think yeah. It's been, if I was to summarize it in like 3 words: chaotic, intense, and challenging. In the sense that I have had to come over a lot of personal challenges. I think with being online and with me adjusting to the expectations of what it is like to be a debut author. So I've loved it. Like I've genuinely loved it so much. It's everything I've ever wanted. But I didn't realize that it wouldn't just be as simple as you've achieved your dreams, you can be happy now. It is if you achieve your dreams, you can you can be happy, but you can also then have to worry about, are we selling enough? How are the publishing team supportive? Are the readers enjoying it? Am I able to maintain this and do it alongside a full time job?
Did you realize all of that before you'd even published?
As I was warming up, as I was getting ready for the publication date, obviously I'm starting to think about all of these things, and I'm starting to have these insecurities. But now that it's out, it's more about like, can I maintain this? Is it going to be a one-off thing, or can I try and push for longevity? And I think that comes with additional stresses, as well as now that I know so much about the publishing industry, having been a part of it, I need to make sure that I'm staying grounded and I'm not, death by comparison. I feel
Yeah,
like that's something that
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I've
What
really worked on this year.
what do you think like is the biggest thing that you didn't know that in hindsight you would have liked to know
Oh my god, that's
before
such a good question.
publishing?
Um, I think the advice that I would give myself is just to run your own race, and I feel like that's something that
Okay.
I've struggled with because I'm always comparing upwards, and that's a good thing because it's helped me to strive to be better, always to just like improve on myself. But it also, comparison is the thief of joy, and I also feel like it's challenging when I'm always looking to what can I do best, or what is other people doing, or how are other people doing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, let's just stop this by the roses, just enjoy it. Like this is what you wanted.
This is your
This is
journey.
my journey, and
Yeah.
I feel like that's something that I would give any author, wwhether they're self-publishing or traditionally publishing, is don't compare your step one with someone else's step 10, and book one with someone else's book 10. Um,
100%.
I think that's something I really wish I could have drilled into myself at the time.
Such good
I've been saying this to
advice.
myself every year. I'm sure I will,
Yeah.
but definitely
Yeah.
now this year I'm starting to get better at that.
And um in terms of like the imposter syndrome, a
Mm.
lot of people feel no matter where they are in their life. Like,
Yeah.
does that come through for you? Because you always seem to have it so like together online.
Yeah, I think that's a lie.
That's a
um,
lie.
I I think I do struggle with imposter syndrome, and I do struggle with, am I good enough, and is the story good enough? And no matter how many book sales or how many nice conversations, it's something that I'm working on independently. But that's just me, my character, as someone who maybe isn't the most optimistic, like deep down at my core. But then I think a way to overcome that is to surround yourself with people that do remind you and do check in and remind you that this is everything you ever wanted, and that it was once upon a time you never thought you'd get this. So I have a really good support system of people, friends, both online and family in my life, that are very good at reminding me, you are here because you deserve to be here,
Yeah.
and you should be proud of that, which I think is really important. And I think one thing that I'm trying to do by documenting my journey so much online is just reminding other people that it isn't all just successes and this and that, but you will have these crushing moments of insecurity. And like
Yeah.
I was sat on a panel with authors that were like best-selling authors across the globe, and I'm there like, oh god, like I'm feeling really inadequate in comparison. But then I just reminded myself again, I was like, no, I fought for my place to be here,
Yeah.
and they probably felt like this when they
Yeah.
were in my position, and that's quite nice. So I feel like
Have you had some like really like I can imagine that you've had some quite wholesome chats with other
yeah,
authors.
yeah.
Ha- has there been any advice that's been imparted to you from other authors?
You know what? I got on a Zoom call with Adam Silvera, who wrote "They Both Die at the End," and he is one
Love
of
that
them.
book.
He's just such a nice man, and he gave me loads of advice relating to publishing because I went into publishing without an agent, so that's a very atypical journey, and for that reason, I was quite naive. Like I admit at the time, I admit now, I was very, very naive because I didn't have the agents
Yeah.
to represent me. And he gave me loads of really sage advice about publishing and about standing up for myself. So he was fantastic for that. And then just a whole host of other authors that have just again reminded me that it takes time and that from what they can see, it looks really good. So regardless of how I'm thinking and feeling about my journey, externally it looks quite positive. So I'm like, ah, well,
Yeah.
perception's reality. So
Yeah.
um,
And in terms of like your writing journey, so every author has a unique process, and
mm,
that's so understandable. But what I find really, really crazy about your journey is that you've had these characters, this narrative in your head for what was it, 10 years?
yeah, it's coming up to nearly 12 years now. Yeah, yeah, 11, 12. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Was that sort of like intentional? Do you think that you are happy that your writing journey was that way? Um,
I would have loved a book deal back at 13, but I so didn't deserve one back then, and I can appreciate that now. I got it when I deserved it, kind of thing.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I think the benefit of having stuck with the story and character for so long is that I now know it so well. Whereas if I feel like I churned it out within quite a short time frame, then maybe it would feel like that. It would feel a little bit superficial on the page. Whereas I feel like the reason why so many readers connect to the characters is because I've had a decade to flesh them out and grow up with them and have them as like my little imaginary friends. So I was like, right, well, how can I curate them in a way that feels vivid and real to everyone else that hasn't had them for 10 years?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I quite enjoy that. And the 10 years allowed me to write the first three and a half, yeah, but first three and the start of book four, multiple times over the years. So
Really?
when I'm doing my writing now with my editors, they're like, "Oh my god, you guys, you're so good on your deadlines." I'm like, "Well, yeah, because I've got the first draft. Obviously, I'm rewriting it. I'm really rewriting it, but in essence, a lot of it's similar." Um,
So how much of it have you like written the first draft for then?
I had I wrote the first three books when I was 13, 14, like that time. I think over those 2, 3 years, I wrote three books, three and a half books, and then I stopped because of GCSEs and A levels and university, and then COVID
Very
hit,
important.
which is all really important stuff, and that's why I stopped. And then when COVID hit, I was in my final year of my undergraduate degree, so I went back, and then that's when I was thinking like, I can't get these books out of my head. So even though the last 4 or 5 years I wasn't writing, I was adding stuff to my notes page all the time, and I was thinking about them, thinking, oh, I wish I can find the time. So when that hit and the world got put on pause, I went back and I rewrote books one, two, and three,
Oh
and
wow.
in like 1 year, not even like less than 1 year, and I deferred placements for like two different masters and my PhD for teaching, and I was working two part-time jobs,
Yeah.
whilst writing full-time and starting content creation. So that was the year that I was
Wow.
like, right, I'm going to make this year count.
Yeah.
And then I started my
So
teaching
lockdown
qualification.
wasn't a blur for you. It was definitely like
it
a
was
really
it was like, let's lock in.
monumental.
Yeah, I was like, let's lock in during lockdown and just get
Yeah.
something done.
Love that motto. Lock in
I
during
can't, I might
lockdown.
write that down somewhere. But yeah, so when it came around to doing my teaching qualification, I had already written books one and two and three, but books one and two multiple times, and I was working on book one, and that's kind of where things picked up.
How many drafts do you do?
So everyone's got a different. I had a lunch yesterday with Jennifer Lynn Barnes, who wrote the Inheritance Game, and Karen M.
So
McManus,
jealous.
who wrote. It was organised by Penguin House of YA, and it was really brilliant. Yeah, Karen M. McManus, who wrote One of Us Lying, and then Cynthia Murphy as well. And they were saying, I think Jennifer was saying that she writes multiple different drafts. So she'll write one draft,
Different.
like yeah, write one draft and then put it away, don't look at it, and then write the second, and or like rewrite endings and kind of write retrospectively, like think how does it end? Okay, how am I going to get there? Whereas I can't do that. I feel like that would take me too long.
Yeah.
So I write my first draft and then I go through and I edit it extensively and I rewrite sections if I feel like I need to. And
Yeah.
I've noticed that the sections that I've rewritten the most are the better sections. They're
Really?
better writing quality. Um,
Why
I
do you
can
think
really
that
identify
is?
that with. Sorry?
Why do you think that is?
I think maybe because I've just had that many more months slash potentially years understanding the craft, and my prose has got better. I think, but like the actual content is near enough similar, like really, really similar. I've only changed. Well, I've changed a good handful of things, but yeah, my writing quality I think has got better because I'm reading more, and by reading more, I'm passively researching, I guess.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about a bit about like content creation
Hmm.
and book talk, bookstagram, the
Yeah.
sort of like book community
Hmm.
online. Um, you're quite what do you think about social media in general?
I think it is a fantastic and dangerous tool. And I'm saying that from a teacher's perspective as well. I think it's a brilliant way of connecting with people and networking and making friends and marketing yourself. But I also think that people forget that the digital footprint lasts forever, and that you need to be careful about what you're putting out and who is receiving that content and what they can do with that information. So I love it. I love social media, and I never anticipated my life being on social media. Like I was never one of those people growing up.
Yeah,
I was always like, even I've got like my private Instagram account and don't let people follow it, and I unfollow people or remove followers that are not really in my life, not because I don't have any love for them anymore, but maybe just because I don't want them having a window into that side of my
the
life.
private
The
side.
private side,
Yeah,
yeah. But with book talk and with my bookstagram account, it is trying to showcase as much as possible. I'm not one of those like, oh, it's so loose, it's so mysterious. Like, what's going on? They're not posting anything. Like, I'm not that. I'm there. I'm there. Like, if I'm going through something, then you're going to witness it because I feel like there's a joy in sharing, and it helps to illuminate the journey for a lot of other people.
yeah,
And that's something that I know I would have benefited from when I started publishing. But it is exhausting because it feels like a full-time job.
yeah.
So I love it,
It
but it
does.
has its limits, and I'm on the phone like constantly on the phone because if I'm not on it, then I'm going to miss something. I'm going to miss a trend, or I'm going to miss this or that, or whatever. So it's a lot, and again, I need people around me to tell me, like, Andy, put your phone down,
Keep yourself grounded.
just keep yourself grounded. If it's nothing's going to go wrong if you don't post at this window of time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
I think it's really, really interesting because I feel like I personally have a struggle a lot, and I don't know if this is a like a gender thing,
mhm,
but I struggle a lot with like comparison,
yeah,
and I think that you're so right in saying it's a dangerous tool, but it's also so good for connecting people and
yeah.
connecting the community.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as a from a psychology teacher's perspective as well, research has shown that the longer you spend on social media, the worse your self-image is,
Really?
and it's a really direct correlation. And I think that that's why not only is it, let's be honest, it's limited people's attention spans as well.
Yeah.
And like I can't do anything without times two
7 seconds.
speed. Yeah, like 7 seconds
Anything.
times two, like I'm doing like everything is with times two speed, and I'm dyslexic, so I need to actually have like minus two speed. But I was just so I feel like that, but then also just the death by comparison, and for me with my publishing journey, where people again only really document the successes, I'm only ever seeing that,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to also show that, but also trying to show the authentic side of publishing and my
Yeah.
publishing journey. So I think, yeah, I'm with you. I compare a lot, but
Yeah.
mine maybe isn't as much on my body image or my appearance, although I do that as well. But mine's maybe more on
Your journey.
my journey and maybe like accomplishments, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Because what I found is that so a lot of people find you before they find your book
Hmm.
and vice versa. Did you feel a sort of pressure to, get big to publicize your book, or was that just a natural progression for you?
I felt that pressure. I imposed that pressure upon myself before I even got my publishing deal. I'm my own worst enemy, guys.
Of course.
I never give up. That's why I hurt my characters because I'm like, feel what I feel. But
Feel my pain.
but I think I did a workshop with HarperCollins. They did a really fantastic academy called the Authors Academy, and it's to help authors from or young writers, writers of any age, from underrepresented backgrounds learn about the traditional publishing industry. And if you make it onto this course, which opens, I think it's twice a year now, there's like fiction division, non-fiction, and illustrations. And then within a year, you can submit directly to them. And then one of the main pieces of advice is that publishers can feel a sense of reassurance if the author is able to talk about their stuff online and if they've got a social following because it's already got an audience there that would be willing potentially to buy the book. So at that point in time, I thought, right, well, I've started to research book talk. It was like early days. It was like 2021, 22, I think
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
Um, and they were coming up on my FYP, which is my normal like silly spam account. I was
Yeah.
like, right, let me just make an account and let me just start talking about it. So I started talking about my books and then realized that I was getting followers, but I realized it felt like I was almost cold selling a book
Okay.
that wasn't written or published, that felt a really long way away, into a community of readers. And I realized my perspective as an author wasn't actually going to be that involved. So I thought, well, let me just write a look, let me just discuss more about being a reader and my love for reading. And it helped me to fall back into reading. So I started growing my following from from book reviews and funny, silly bookish skits, and like all of these like weird little things that I was doing as a reader.
That
And then
other readers resonate with, right?
exactly, the other readers will follow you for, as opposed to following an author. And
Yeah.
people only really follow an author if they like the author's books, really.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
because I didn't have any books out, I was like, let me, I'm a reader at my heart. Let me just showcase that, and then I can mention a book that I'm writing and showcase this journey. And I think it's really important to show the journey before you've got the publishing deal, because you've got evidence of the before and after.
Yeah.
And then when I got my publishing deal, which is through TikTok, my editor of my publishing company directly messaged me in her first week on the job as the editorial director at Simon & Schuster to say, we've seen you talk about this book. Because at that point, I'd got an editor. I paid for a separate editor, paid for my own cover because I was going to self-publish because I wasn't getting anywhere with traditional publishing. So then they reached out to me, and then
how close were you to self-publishing?
like a couple of months away minimum. Yeah, I'd paid for the cover and I'd done structural edits with a separate
Was it similar to this?
Really different. I can show you. It was really different. It was giving more like medieval Game of Thrones.
Maybe we can put it in the
yeah, I will because like I've got the rights to it, but when SNS got involved, they were like, can we do our own cover? And I was like, you know what, yeah, fine, like you guys are experts. I still love the first cover, but it doesn't capture the theme.
I love that cover.
I like that. It's I like the colour. I like it, like it's clearly fantasy.
When you released the Dark That Hides Us cover as well, I was like, oh my god.
I think that's even nicer. I think it's like the hot older sister. It's like really nice.
This?
Yeah. But like the cover of the Dark That Hides Us is literally fire. Like that's what I love about it.
Is that why? Are you more excited for the Dark That Hides Us?
I think I've spent so much time with just this first book that it's kind of
the novelty has worn off.
Yeah, maybe in an extent, but also like it was the entry point, and now I want readers to know that that's what I started with, but there's only gonna be more to like build upon. Like so that's why I'm really excited about book 2, because I'm like, yes, read book 1. I love book 1. It's always got a special place in my heart. But book 2 is, I feel like I'm getting better and better as a writer.
Yeah.
And I just love the storyline for that. But
I think it's so interesting, just coming back to what you said earlier about the workshop that you did, and how you were kind of told that like the publishing houses would take you more seriously if you had a presence online.
I think they just have that. The publishing is one of the only industries where they give you a lump sum of money before they've seen if you can sell. Usually, you might get an investment, but you have to get the book sales. Whereas with a publishing deal, you get given an advance, and it's like, well, let's see if you get it back, if you earn this money back, and that's obviously quite scary for them. So
they have to being your own salesman, right?
Yeah, so they need to feel like they could be confident in giving you that amount on it and in publishing you, and they can be much more reassured by having a platform. So I actually was considered to be platform publishing because I had a platform. So if either you're a celebrity, you've got a social media following, that's what I was considered, even though my following was only like I think 80 or 90,000 on TikTok at the time, which was still amazing, but not nearly as much as like actual celebrities. So that's why I was quite heavy on the right. Now I think once I got my publishing deal, I was like, right, now I need to really, really try and get as many followers as possible between announcement, which was in November, and April, which is when book 1 came out. It's like that time I need to get like many followers, get as many people to pre-order it, so that our first week sales are really impactful.
At that point, do you feel like you at any point did anything inauthentic? I think in terms of like the reels that you posting, or like the skits that you were making or whatever.
I feel like that's a really good question. I feel like at the time I was still producing the same amount of content as I was producing before I ever got a book deal, and the same kind of content, but I felt I posted much less book reviews, which is what got me a lot of followers in the first place, because book reviews I didn't have the time to read, because I was working on extensive edits and other stuff, and I had a full-time job for the last year running a psychology department in my school, and I'd only qualified the year before as a teacher, so I didn't have any time to read any book that wasn't mine.
So busy.
and then also, and where I would review books critically, both positively and negatively, I stopped doing any negative reviews because the author sphere is quite small, and you never know who you're going to run into, and if you want to critique another person's book, and because of how much I put my heart and soul into my book, I thought, well, it's not worth posting a negative review. Like, yes, people might agree with it. Yes, it's my opinions, but do my opinions need to be showcased to everyone on good reasons? I was like, no, probably not.
Do you believe that everyone can kind of? I mean, obviously, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but do you think that because I'm sure there are people out there that this book hasn't resonated with.
Yeah.
So, like,
I think people can do whatever they like with their accounts. I never really posted negative reviews even before I got a publishing deal. Not because I wanted to get into publishing, but because I wanted my page to be more of book
positive.
recommendations.
Yeah.
But people do post negative book reviews, and I think they're equally as important to understand whether you do want to read a book or not and spend your money on it. So I love watching reviews of all kind, positive and negative. I just made a conscious effort to not post any negative, especially when I became an author. And if people do post negative reviews, I think they're valid in their own sense. You can do whatever you want with your platform. I just choose not to do it with mine,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
because I want to keep it positive.
So you're a British Greek Cypriot.
hmm
Tell me about that. Do you feel connected to that side of yourself?
Yeah, really. So my dad's fully Greek Cypriot, and my mum's half Greek Cypriot. Her dad
Okay.
is. So I'm 3/4 Greek Cypriot, and I lived there. Lived in Cyprus when I was younger, for a year. My family's very much in the Greek culture, where every stereotype you can think of is so true. We're loud. We're we're
Do you
loud. We're
smash the
over involved.
plates?
We don't even smash plates. That's Greece mainland, and I want to smash plates, but we go to restaurants where they smash plates. So we don't do that. It was like with our IKEA plates. You have to buy special plates to smash, otherwise it's a lot of money. But we are. I mean, we're British Cypriots, and my parents were born and raised in the UK as well for most of their lives. So we're British in that sense, but we're my grandparents basically all Cypriot. Like we go there quite frequently. We're going to try and book a holiday for next year as well. And my community that I surround myself with. So a lot of friends growing up were Greek as well, just by chance.
Okay.
Or Greek Cypriot or Turkish Cypriot, and like my cousins and the people I spend a lot of my time with now as an adult, are in that kind of cultural sphere,
Yeah.
which I think is really nice because I love it so much. Like I love my culture and I love bringing people into my culture, like my non-Greek friends. And my girlfriend is English, and her family, like they love it. And I'm like, there's a sense of pride because Greek Cypriots are very, very patriotic.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that we want
What's
to
your
share
favourite thing about the culture in itself?
food. Food. You didn't even finish that
Food, the
question.
Greek food.
The food. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I love the culture in terms of the family focus. But that can start like borderline family focus / family over involvement. So I think it's like a fine line.
Yeah.
But I love how supportive we are. And I love the food.
Have you got a big family? Because
My
that's one
immediate
thing
family is
I
not actually.
associate with
Yeah,
with
with
Greeks.
Greeks. Yeah, no, my immediate family isn't. It's quite small. It's only I've got an older brother and a younger brother. So it's just the five of us in my family.
Are you
But
quite close?
we're all quite. Yeah, we're all. My older brother's a year and a half older than me. My younger brother's 2 years younger. We're all living at home, so we're all very close with my mum and dad. But I've got a lot of cousins, and my cousins we're very close with, on both sides. So that the family feels very, very large stepping into it. I remember when my girlfriend first came into the family, it's like, oh, but this feels like the mafia. And I was like, well, we know where to have the bodies. And like, no, I was like, no, we're joking, we're joking. But it's a nice network, and obviously where everyone knows one another, and they were brought up with these people. Everyone's uncle and auntie, so it feels even bigger, even if
Yeah.
there's no direct blood relation there.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting that in your book, Demi, one of the female protagonists, is Greek. She's got a Greek heritage.
Yeah.
Was it really interesting to write that for you, or
Yeah.
did you feel connected or like more familiar with her? Or
I did actually, and initially, Alexis Michaels is a very, very Greek name, but his character isn't Greek. He initially was, but then I thought I'm imposing myself too much on that character, and I wanted there to be a representation of a diverse range of cultures. So with Demi, I soon realized that I want each of the characters to represent a different culture and a different part of the globe.
okay,
So with each of the different characters, the traditional elements are seen to be different compass directions. So Earth is north, fire is south, east is air, and west is water. So when I was looking at the map, I was like, right, what locations and therefore where can these characters come from, and what nationalities and cultures do I want them to have come from as well? And Demi, with being the North Hemisphere, I thought, well, Greece. I want. She was always Greek in my opinion. Her name was Greek. Demi Nicholas is really traditionally Greek.
yeah,
But then I also thought, well, Greek and then also Egyptian. So she's half Egyptian, half Greek, which I'm going to explore more in the sequels where we get to see more of her family.
I love that.
So we get to like experience that, and I felt like I can speak on a lot of areas, and I love it when Greek people read the book because there's a quote that's written in Greek. Her prophecy told to her is initially written in Greek, and it's not translated until much later in the book when something very
Yeah,
significant happens to her. So that I felt like let's just drop a few things in
Do you
to
speak it?
not fluently,
No.
but yeah, we dropped out of Greek school because we cried too much. But it's more like, but it's more like I know like basics.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, quite childlike
yeah.
Greek.
And then also something that I really, really loved is the characters. We've got such a strong cast of characters. And in my opinion, I feel like readers, and you touched upon this just now,
Hmm.
um, can really draw something from each character that they kind of resonate with.
Yeah.
Was that intentional? Do you feel like you did that with purpose, or
Yeah, I really did because I remember I've read some books recently, and I felt like the characters felt a bit one-dimensional, and I
okay?
wondered why that was. And I remember trying to, like, when I'm reading now, I can't ever switch off my writer brain, so I was analyzing why was I feeling that. Was that because of the speed at which I was reading, or was that because of the actual content itself? And I remember thinking, well, maybe the characters feel underdeveloped because they were rushed, or maybe just because their complexity has not been showcased. So when I was constructing my characters' profiles, I made sure that I really knew where they'd come from, where they are now, and where they're going. So I made it important to think, right, I need to know, and I think this was a bit overkill. And there's going to be there's so much research that I've done that's not included at all.
It
But
should be.
I know it should be. I've got a separate document of like all like loads of research. But I made it really important to myself to know like what's the character's family dynamics and what are the relationships and what is a very significant event that's channeled their core belief about themselves. What is the lie that they tell people and the lie that they tell themselves about where they are, and what are they hoping to achieve in the future?
Oh
So I
wow.
kind of had an understanding of these characters' journeys and their arcs across the whole quartet, in addition to like how does each one the plot line either facilitate that or challenge those developments. And then I also had a lot of inspiration from the zodiac signs. Each of the characters are based on the zodiac elemental personality
Yeah,
traits. So
yeah.
that was also quite important to me. So
What
identifying what
What do
those
you mean
are.
by that then?
So the 12 star signs can be divided into quarters into three
Oh,
elementals.
water. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
so I think for like I know that for fire signs it's Leo, Aries, and Sagittarius. So I was looking at what the personality traits of those zodiac signs, and that helped to construct Blaze's character, the fiery character. But I think the reason why a lot of people connect with the characters is because it's not just those obvious characteristics, but also how I can subvert those to make them complex and
Yeah,
a bit more unique. So having Blaze be also a little bit vulnerable, like a flame is, having him provide warmth and provide comfort and care, and not just be this beautiful thing to stare at from a distance.
yeah.
And with Kaylee's character was really important for me. It was one of my favorite characters because of how complex she is,
She's so complex.
because there's a lot of on pages like, oh, maybe she's just a bit of a mean girl, but then when you know about her character's background and what she's gone through, which I'm currently what I've already understood, but currently writing and fleshing out, I feel like that really helps us to connect with the character, and also to see that yes, as the air sign, you're expecting her to be an airhead, but it's also about her seeking control because of the things in her past. And I feel like if you know your characters like that, if you make them real, then they would feel real on the page to other people, and that's what allows them to resonate with others, I think.
So, in terms of like when you started writing,
Hmm.
were they really, really different back then, or did you have them quite clear cut in your
You
mind?
know what? They were not that developed when I first started.
Okay,
I knew who Alexis was, and I knew that he would have a challenge with his mental well-being. Didn't quite know what aspect it was. I wasn't sure if it was initially it was bipolar that
okay,
I think was part of his diagnosis, and I knew that he would carry the story forward. And I actually didn't even have four characters. I had the air character being the love interest.
oh really?
Yeah, and before I even had like names for them, and the fire character being the best friend. And then I thought, well, then there's four elements, there's four elementals, and I remember really vividly having this daydream one time of a girl walking through a forest with the sunlight on her, and Alexis staring at her and just being like absolutely in love with her.
Besotted.
And yeah, and I was like, love interest is Demi. Love interest has to be
It has
has
to
to be
be.
Earth. And I feel like, and the way that I've done it is that the elements complement each other quite well.
Yeah,
So you need water for growth, and you need oxygen for fire. So I
yeah.
like how they're connected that way. Um, but I didn't have strong constructs of them as characters, and so I started developing. Then I started doing my research into the zodiac signs. I started attributing characteristics of my friends that reminded me of them,
Yeah.
and like family members. I was like, oh, okay, maybe my cousin reminds me a little bit of that, or I like this trait from this person, so I'm gonna feed that into, I think, these characters, this one's the best one for that.
Yeah.
That's what I quite like doing, and I'm still changing my characters' personalities all
Really?
the time, but I'm giving them environmental reasons for those changes.
So you've chosen to set it very urban, so we know where we are
Yeah,
at any given time. Was there a reason for that urban fantasy setting, or because you could have put it anywhere? You
yeah,
could have made up a world.
yeah. So the reason why I actually picked contemporary, there's so many reasons why I picked contemporary fantasy, why I chose to do it in like our everyday life.
Yeah.
One, because it's easier. I didn't need to make. So initially, when I was a 13-year-old with homework, I was like, this is easy. I can do places that exist. Another reason is the main reason, I think, because I was contemplating making up my own fantasy world, because it would have been easier to set the rules and magic system of that. But the reason why I did our world is because people often forget the beauty and the magic of our natural world because we spend so much time digital, like on digital platforms. So for me, as I was writing this story, it was a way for readers to connect with the natural world and places that exist in our globe. And we don't need to go to a high fantasy setting to find something magical when we've got something magical in our continent and across the world. And I think that was quite important for me to have different locations across the globe to look at different pieces of beauty in other cultures and continents and countries.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to do that, and the reason why I picked those locations, because it tied into what I was saying earlier. Each location that they go on this quest is to find the elemental gem, and that gem is placed in an area that is in the compass directions. So
Okay.
I was doing a lot of. So
Yeah.
the only one that actually remained the same, the only place on the quest that is the same from when I was 13 years old, is the Earth Gem, the Temple of Delphi, where I went to in Greece this summer. It's the only one, because I remember thinking, oh, do I do the Parthenon? But then I thought that's so obvious. And I was doing a lot of research, so I loved Greek mythology growing up.
Yeah.
Really, really loved it. Oh, and another reason why I picked contemporary fantasy is that I loved Percy Jackson and the Cassandra Clare books and their contemporary. And I thought, well, I don't need to go to another world to write magic.
Yeah.
But the Earth Gem, to go to Delphi, because they argue that Delphi was the center of the world.
Right.
And the center of the earth, and that there was an earth creature there, and there was prophecies there. And I thought, well, that ties into a lot of what I'm already planning on doing. So I
Yeah.
thought, right, I have Delphi there. Initially, I had, for the fire gem, they go it to Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania.
Yeah.
Because I wanted it to be in Africa, but before I realized it was going to be close in Africa, I had it as Mount Vesuvius in Italy.
Yes.
That was my original location, because
Oh my goodness,
yeah,
really?
I'd been there, and I climbed up to the top where the crater was. So that was the original location of like the fight scene, and then I changed it to Mount Kilimanjaro, and I had to rewrite that whole section.
How often do you do that within your writing process and like go like, oh, that doesn't quite fit, like let's
Yeah, I think
reformat that.
when I'm, especially at the start of the process, when I'm going back to rewriting books I've already written, I have a really, really deep dive into, is this appropriate? And I look at the structural edits, and then I go back and I rewrite sections. Whereas with new books that I'm writing that haven't been fully drafted, I can kind of do it a little bit more ongoing. But I like to plan ahead. I like to know
Yeah.
what to write towards to drop the breadcrumbs appropriately. I can't remember where the air gem was. Oh, I remember the air gem initially was in Brazil.
Yes.
In
Yeah.
Brazil is in the it was along the shanty towns. I remember having the fight with the dragon underneath the Christ the Redeemer statue, whereas now I've moved it to the floating mountains in China, which Avatar is based on. And the water gem was initially in Venezuela, which is where there is the highest freestanding waterfall, which is called Angel Falls. And I liked Angel
I want
Falls
to
and
go there now.
yeah. I remember thinking Angel Falls and what happens at the waterfall section of my book, that
Yeah.
what happens to one of the characters with the waterfall is always going to happen. And I thought that was good, but then I changed it to the largest waterfall system, which was Brazil, Argentina, and that's Agazu Falls, which I am going to next month.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I haven't told anyone that actually. So this is like I've booked with friends to spend New Year's in South America, Brazil, Argentina, only for 10 days. But I'm making them go to Agazu Falls so I can see the waterfall
So fun.
system.
Did you do a lot of traveling before?
No, I didn't go to a single. Didn't even go to Stonehenge before I started
Google
writing.
images like
Everything.
waterfalls.
That's what I love about like everything online. I've still, and whenever I think of the floating mountains in China, I always think of this video that I watched on YouTube where someone had a drone, and I remember because they had like a Imagine Dragons song in the background. So whenever I think of like I always think of this song like I'm
You've
on
got
top
a
of the world.
soundtrack playing.
Yeah, so I love that. So I did all of my research was like drone footage and watching videos, and that's why when I went to Delphi, I was like, right, I need to take my book to see if I actually described it appropriately. But luckily, I did. At least that one I definitely did.
Has there
Yeah.
been anything in your writing process where you've been like, because I know that there's a lot of things that get changed
Hmm.
by editors, for example. Have you been very steadfast in a lot of your decisions, or have you been lenient in some places?
You know what? I'd say somewhere down the middle. So I remember, so when I was first doing my big edits, my editor says that the characters should meet on page because I originally had it as the characters being friends from before. So all four characters were friends, and they went on this school trip or this car journey to Stonehenge, and I had to rewrite everything across all books. And when I say rewrite the connections. That's why some people say like it feels like they've become friends and family really, really quickly.
Yeah.
Like, well, because I've had it already as they did, as they were.
They were.
They were. So it's like fan fat. So, but then she
But
said,
you weren't married to that. You weren't.
no, I think that was the one that was probably one of the biggest things for me to adjust because it changed so much in the storytelling, and I had to implement new relationships in moments when we can feel the characters becoming friends, which before I didn't need to introduce this because we were joining them already on the journey. Whereas my editor said, no, actually, it's important to start the story with them starting that new friendship or starting that new relationship. So
Were you quite like, okay, yeah?
I got my head. Well, so then I compromised. I said, well, I can't have them all of the meeting. I said, Demi and Alex need to know each other because they need to know each other, and Kaylee and Blaze need to know each other.
Because they need to know each
They need to know each other, and they're
other.
like the family networks, and because of later books and series, the families are friends and the neighbours. And I thought that way we'll have them as pairs. So we went down the middle, rather than them being all friends or all strangers. They met each other in pairs. So
Yeah,
it's still like we're meeting other people,
yeah.
but we've got that long-standing friendship that we can know that we can count on
And we can build on as
and we can
well.
really build
Yeah,
on. So that changed, and then the only other major change it was meet on page, and it was romanticy. It was make this book higher in romance because my book initially was the romance subplot was much more of a subplot, and it was more
subtle.
subtle and much more slow burn because I had 4 books to write it over. But because romanticy is so successful, Midas said, I think you're worthwhile tapping into this because I love seeing these glimpses, but make them more than glimpses. Maybe make them scenes.
Do you like reading romantasy?
I do. I don't read as much as I should do for research,
Yeah.
but I really most majority of books I read are romanticy.
The
But there's
reason I
some
ask
romance.
that is because obviously it would have been a bit of a shock to the system if you hadn't really
Yeah,
liked it.
yeah,
And you would have had to go along with it and just kind of make it a bit
yeah.
romantic.
That's why I felt like it was so easy to do those changes because I wanted to do them, but I didn't know how to do them.
Yeah.
But because I primarily read fantasy books with romance, either romantic or with a romance subplot, I found it quite easy, and I remember loving writing the romantic scenes more than I write like any other scenes. So when I was adding in these chapters or these scenes that these soft, cute moments, I'm like, I love it. And then book two, because I was rewriting that from the start as opposed to finished products, whatever. I can. There's a lot more romance in book two, and there's only going to be more in book three. Not at the detriment of the fantasy story, but there's a lot because that is what makes the romantic feel grounded. Because the romance is probably the more realistic elements of the story
Yeah.
as opposed to the fantasy.
Yeah. Um. Also, you are a psychology teacher.
Hmm.
Where did your love for psychology begin?
You know what? I genuinely don't ever remember a time not loving psychology. It's one of those intrinsic loves. I know that my mum loved it and loved psychology, but I was lucky my school offered it as a GCSE, so I started
Okay.
studying it when I was in year 10, so when I was like 14, 15. And most schools only offer it as an A level subject. And the school that I work at, we only teach it at A level. But I've always had a really, really deep fascination with the brain and behavior. And I very, very strongly agree with the notion that it should be a compulsory subject because I don't think anything is more important as a human being than understanding the people around you and understanding how your mind works when you're part of society.
Yeah.
So I'm really passionate and I've always drawn to films that explore it, books that have psychological undertones as well. So I've loved the psychology aspect always, and
Do you
I'm
think that
so
comes from
passionate.
like a personal place of like, because I had a friend once who had like clinical depression,
Hmm.
um, and because of that, he was literally one of my closest friends, and I did like a deep dive into clinical depression
Yeah,
because I was, obviously it was a
yeah.
personal subject matter. But was there anything that you feel? Were you just really, really interested in it, or
I
was there
think
anything personal?
I think there's a lot of personal. I think people go into psychology to understand themselves. You often find that the reason why people feel so pulled towards the subject is because of how informative it is and insightful it is. So if someone's passionate about psychology, you can assume on a lot of cases it's because they've brushstrokes with a psychopathology, which I know obviously isn't the sole part of psychology. It's only a really small subdivision. There's so many other parts of psychology: educational, occupational, business, marketing, law. Like there's loads of different facets, but a lot of people initially think of psychology and they think of mental health. So if
Yeah.
they go into psychology, it's because they want to better understand or improve their mental health, or
Yeah.
because they want to help improve other people's.
Yeah.
And that's what it was for me. It was
Yeah.
to figure out what was going on with me and to understand myself. And then now as an adult, it's to inform and inspire younger people,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think.
And I think that that leads me very nicely onto the fact that you do include it very much,
Mm,
hallucinations, mental health, in your book.
yeah,
Was that an easy thing to do for you?
probably the hardest. I'd say
Really?
out of everything, character construction, plot
Really?
development, that was all a breeze. Writing writing Alexis psychosis was the most difficult, the most important, and the thing I was most intimidated by, because I that was one thing I could not get wrong. If they didn't like the main character, if they didn't like the romance, didn't like anything, I could have dealt with. But if people's real lived experience of psychosis didn't
Align.
align, then I would have felt like I had done an injustice. So for me, because my background, so after I did my education, I went into when I was working, when I was writing, was in psychiatric hospitals. So I worked
Okay.
really, really closely with patients with schizophrenia and personality disorders, and I did a lot of training with a private psychologist as well, in different forms of therapy for people suffering with those conditions. So that's when I realized that maybe the bipolar wasn't exactly what I was wanting from Alexa's character, but I had a better understanding of psychosis, and that came from a family history of it as well. So that family history of psychosis, plus an occupational background in it, plus my own personal interest in it, I thought that made it worthwhile and also really, really relevant to the story and to the fantasy
Yeah.
nature. But it was absolutely the thing that was most I cared most about getting right. And I remember when I was first seeing the first few months of reviews, and everyone was saying how seen they felt and how much they loved that. It really just it really
Was it a relief?
it was the biggest relief. And to this day, it still sometimes makes me like tear up, because that's the one thing I had to get right at the expense of everything else, and I got it right by people that have had experience, that have either worked with them or experienced it themselves. And that's one thing that I adore more than anything about my story. I think it makes it unique, and I also think it makes it important as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so beautiful, and it's so nice that you get those that feedback as
Yeah,
well. And in terms of like, so the Light That Blinds Us is a YA fantasy.
yeah,
Was there anything that you felt really, really strongly about? I really want to impart this on younger
yeah,
adults and just
yeah.
people in general.
I think so. I think with it being YA, and I always had it as YA because I was YA when I was writing it, and I've always wanted it to stay YA. And we see a lot of like YA with crossover appeal, and there was a lot of pressure, and even people saying that they would have loved it to have been aged up a little bit more. But I felt like I wanted to write a story that is important for young adults as well. For like, I mean, it's applicable for anyone to read at any ages, but for me, a big audience was young men reading, because young men don't read, and they're the statistically the largest. They're the group that reads the least, and they are the group that will probably benefit the most from reading, because reading helps to encourage empathy and to facilitate theory of mind. And I feel like that's really important for young men to get. So I remember thinking, I want to write a story that appeals to all readers, readers being the majority a woman-led activity, but also for young boys
Yeah,
to find a book that they feel represented in, and that can help inform them with things that they may not naturally get otherwise. So young male readers was something I thought was quite important. Young readers as a whole, and also just to inform about mental well-being. That was a
yeah,
really important thing as well. That you can feel seen, and that there's power in vulnerability.
yeah.
And that there's a really important quote by Encantus, the mentor figure, and it is
I loved him.
yeah, I've got such a soft space for him in my heart. Book two, you're gonna love him even more. But I think there's a scene in the book when he's giving Alexis his advice, and it is um, always look for the light, and if you can't find it, become it. And I think that's really important as well, to always look for hope and to always look for improvement, and to better your circumstances. But if you can't find an outward source for that, then you have to become your own source of light. And that's something that I wanted readers to take away from that. And that's what I love about readers' reviews, when they can take that away, I
Yeah.
think.
Did you ever in your life have to become your own light?
Yeah. I think why a lot of people go into psychology, why a lot of people are passionate. I think all people at some point do, and I know that I really did for quite a long time, for a very long time when I was younger, and I never thought that I wouldn't.
Yeah.
And I'm in a position now where I'm happy with my life.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
still have my moments,
Yeah.
more so than maybe a lot of other people due to environmental circumstances, loss, predispositions biologically, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But I feel like I was also trying to impart. I was trying to heal myself through a character. I
Yeah.
think so. I was writing a character's journey with the knowledge that that might help. And the
Yeah.
book was completely and utterly cathartic. I wrote that book, and that book, in every sense of the word, really did save my life. It really gave me a purpose.
Really.
So that's why it's so important to me, and that's why I've stuck it out for 11 years, because if it can save my life, then I thought it might be useful in helping to understand someone else's.
Do you think to some extent that book was like a almost like a letter to your younger self?
I think so. I think looking back on it now, I think I would have loved to have read it at the time.
Yeah.
And I was reading at the time because I was writing at the time, so I feel like in a sense, it was kind of both.
Yeah.
But I know that it's going to be the messages from the story, whether they read the book or not, whether they like the book or not, the messages are important. So as long as they're getting that from somewhere, and I think literature is the best way to pass on those messages, that's something that I would want my kids to
Yeah.
also have an understanding of, and people around me all the time.
Did you read as a child?
I was a huge reader. I was such a
Really?
nerd. My brothers would be playing Call of Duty, and I'd be in the back with my fifth Skullduggery Pleasant, ordering the next one before I'm even halfway through the second one, for the
I
fifth
love
one.
that.
So
Love that.
I was a really big reader. I actually had like hundreds of books, and then when I got to age 14, I kind of stopped reading because I didn't have the time. I gave all my books away. I gave all my books to a young boy
Oh.
that was into reading, but wasn't able to buy books. And then I came back and was like, oh, I miss all those books. But I was like, you know what? I gave it away to a good
Yeah.
cause. So I was a really, really big reader. So I would have loved that because it was like action, romance, understanding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do you think that would be the biggest piece of advice that you would have given yourself at the beginning of your writing journey, knowing what you know now?
Hang tight and be patient because
You'll get there
it's gonna take a long
eventually.
time. I think it was that. It was one thing about me is that I'm not a naturally I don't have a lot of natural faith in myself or in circumstances. And maybe that's because of experiences that I've had that have taught me or maybe prevented me from being so hopeful. But I think it would have just been that gentle reminder. And I even need that now. If I've got 10 years in the future, me coming back to say, don't worry, it's all going to be okay, that would be a sense of reassurance. And I wish that I can go back 10 years and say the same thing to him. But I think I wouldn't have changed a minute of my journey. I wouldn't have sped it up. I wouldn't have done anything differently because it got me to where I am today, and I feel quite proud of the position I'm in today, which I never thought I'd say. So I I'd tell him, hang tight, you'll get there.
Yeah.
You'll get there when you're ready to get there.
Um, I think that it's really, really interesting because this is just a question I thought of just
Mm-hmm.
now. There are a lot of authors who write in the romantic space who are women.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel being a man occupying that space so well as well?
Thank you. Really good question. I felt like I really felt like I had to showcase that I can do it without stepping on anyone's toes, because Romantic is written so well by women, so well. All of my favorite authors are women, like literally every single one of them, and often they're with women as the protagonists as well.
Yeah,
And I remember thinking that I want to showcase that I as a man have been inspired by these authors that are women. That you can have role models that aren't the same gender as you. So
yeah,
I feel like that was something important for me to take on board. I can be inspired, and I can write a story that is no lesser in quality just because I am a man. Because I wouldn't want anyone to have to prejudice against me based on a characteristic that I can't change. In the same way that I wouldn't want anyone else to be prejudiced towards anyone else for another characteristic. So I feel like it was more. I felt maybe a greater sense of. I held myself really, really accountable that I shouldn't speak upon anything that is not my experience to speak upon,
Yeah.
and that there are other people that can tell it better if it's an experience that isn't directly related to me.
Yeah.
So I was like, let's not try and pretend I could do the same thing. I'm gonna do my own thing. I'm gonna have inspiration. I'm gonna write towards an audience that are primarily like made up of women, but there's still gonna be a space in my book. But yeah, it's a really
But I
good
think in
question.
the same way that a lot of women, whether black women or white women,
Mm.
try to inspire younger women to do what they can do
Yeah,
and be like, you can be strong, you can be
yeah,
whatever you want to be. In the same way, you're trying to do the same thing for younger boys,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And that's exactly it. I never realized the significance. I think that was the ignorance that I had. I never realized the significance that my gender would play upon my position, but that's because I've always been in a position where it's never been at my detriment. I see frequently people saying that they would never read a book by a man, that they would never listen to this or that, and I remember feeling really disheartened, thinking like, why? What has that got to do with my ability to do anything? But then I remember thinking like, I'm having a wake up call as a 25-year-old man, like these, whereas other people might have these experiences of discrimination throughout their entire life in every facet of their journey. So I thought, how privileged am I to only have that now? So it's been really informative. It's obviously it's not. It makes me upset when I hear people saying that, because I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's nice. But you don't have to identify with an author or with the protagonist in order to learn from them. Like some of my favorite books are written by black women or center black women.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
black and I'm not a woman,
yeah.
so I feel like it's yeah. I just want it to be another
You want to give
person.
everyone a chance, basically,
Yeah,
to showcase
exactly.
what they can
Yeah,
do.
and that's why I wanted it to be really important that I had a diverse cast of characters
Oh
from
yeah.
different ethnicities, men and women, different sexualities as the stories goes on as well.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I wanted that all to be there so that they could identify with any character in the story, not
Yeah,
just the white appearing male main character.
yeah, yeah, yeah. What do you think's been the hardest point throughout the year in terms of
Oh.
publishing, in terms of the tour, in
Mm.
terms of everything? What do you think's been the the surprisingly the hardest thing?
I think, you know what? In the few months leading up to book launch, that was its own issue. I think both in my private life with me doing what I was doing, staying on top of content creation, writing and publishing, and working full time, that was really, really difficult to try and balance all of those. So in terms of like physically, that was the hardest time.
Yeah,
Um, but in terms of emotionally, what was the hardest time? I'd probably say in the few months afterwards,
yeah,
when I'm constantly trying to stay on that high from the first few weeks of launch,
yeah.
and to try and make sure that everyone else is doing as much as they can, because I am only in
One
control
man.
of my, yeah, exactly. I'm one person, and I can only be held accountable for my own actions. I know that if I'm doing all this promotion and all this, then that's me. And I just wanted to make sure that other people involved were doing the same, or to the same level. But no one is ever going to back your book the way that the author will.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that was something that I struggled with for a long time. Just the death by comparison.
yeah.
Like, doesn't matter what people are doing with other books and with this and that. I'm going to stay on my journey, and I'm going to talk about it.
Stay in my lane,
Stay in my
do my
lane,
own thing.
exactly. And
Yeah,
that if it the readers that it touches, it's not about the number. It was never about the number of readers. It was about the impact of one reader.
yeah,
So if it really impacted that one reader, then I should be happy. And
yeah.
now I'm only seeing the second thing, the number of readers, and that was only because of Yauk, where I was like, I signed.
Was that
Over.
overwhelming?
It was yes, and it was so reassuring. It was like
Really?
more than I can ever put into words. I again, writing is such a solitary activity, and obviously I'm online, so my FYP is purely curated around things that I engage in. So obviously, it's going to be people tagging me in book reviews and commenting and that sort of stuff. So I again was seeing a lot of that, but that doesn't. Those numbers all feel very, very arbitrary. They're all very abstract. I wanted to know in a physical sense. So when I'm seeing queues and queues, and when I didn't even notice how many books I signed. It was my publishing team that had gone and come back 6 times and were like, "You are still signing." And I was like, "Oh yeah." They're like, "Have you eaten?" I was like, "No, not anything." It was like,
Just
"It's you."
adrenaline.
But
Pure
I'm
adrenaline.
really like time blind, and I'm really not good at like taking notice. So it was really nice that my publisher and my girlfriend were there. At the end of it, they were like, "We've had to stop the queue." I was like, "What does that mean?" Because I'm so silly. I'm so dumb sometimes. Like, you signed 100 copies. You were queuing. You were signing for 2 hours more than any other author on this thing.
Oh my
And I was like,
goodness.
that's good, right? And they're like, Andy, just be happy. Like, I was like, oh. And then I came away, and I was physically exhausted. But I remember I've been smiling ever since Saturday because I've never felt so happy that yeah, yeah.
Is it the relief, or is it like the fact that
I think it's
people?
relief.
Yeah,
I think it is relief. I feel relieved that these insecurities that I had maybe didn't actually deserve to have any spotlight.
yeah,
And I've kind of like snatched the microphone away now from these insecurities. I'm like, yeah, well,
yeah,
look what I just did this weekend. So I feel a sense of pride, which I haven't really felt this journey yet,
yeah.
which is lovely.
And I think I only owe it to her, Olivia, your
Mm,
girlfriend.
yeah,
How has it been? Because obviously I know that writing, being an author, can take up so much of your headspace, so much of your
yeah.
brain space. How has it been? Um,
It's been a lot. We've been together now over 5 years. So we've
okay,
gone through a lot of major life events together. We've been for each other through major moments of grief. We've been whilst we're at university, whilst we're starting new jobs. We both started teacher training at the same time to try
really?
and use each other's resources. Yeah, she only seems to use mine. So we've gone through a lot of those. Like, she's moved down to London. So we've gone through a lot of major moments. But the publishing was probably one of the biggest moments for us because that was the start of a career and a start of a new adventure that I was going on, but I wouldn't go on unless she was with me to go on it, sort of thing. So
She is the romance. It's
she
the
is the
romance for
romance. She is the
me.
inspiration. She knows she is, even though, yeah. But content creation was also difficult because the minute I started getting a lot of followers on content creation, you subconsciously must feel an element of, oh, well, a lot of people feel like they know you, or they've got their eyes on you, or they've whatever, and that had a lot of challenges in terms of just us as a couple, just navigating that space and reassuring one another when you've got so many people looking at you.
Yeah,
Um, and then when I was going into publishing again, meeting so many people again, it's that space of like figuring that out and
yeah,
figuring out how to deal with that extra attention, and how to reassure the other person that that attention doesn't equate to the attention or the love for one another.
yeah,
So it was
yeah,
more like bringing someone on board, but without forcing them into the limelight just because I was going into the
yeah,
limelight. That's something I was really conscious of, which is why for a very long time she didn't appear in any of my social media because she didn't want to. And I
yeah,
was like, that's completely like, you can do
yeah,
whatever you like.
yeah.
But now it's nice because people can be really respectful to me because they know that there is someone on the scene.
Have you ever
I think.
had a moment where people have just been way too over familiar with you?
Yeah, I get that quite not as much anymore. And again,
Okay,
I hope that's because that they are aware that there
a
is
line.
yeah. So I've always got very strong boundaries. I had that as a work in the psychiatric hospitals. I've had that as a teacher. I've always had very strong boundaries. But in terms of again being a man in a space where there is a lot of women, it was just again just letting people know in a casual, polite way that I'm here to write my books and I've got my partner.
And I'm really glad that you like my books, but like,
Yeah, but
let's keep it there.
let's keep it as like we can be really close friends, but let's not you overstep the mark kind of
Yeah,
thing. Which is why like now it's like social media is aware. If anyone follows me for more than a couple of weeks, they'll be aware that I have got a partner. It's just a gentle reminder
yeah,
to them, you're here for my content or for my books,
yeah, yeah. But I
nothing
think
else.
sometimes the line can be quite blurred in terms of like when you love a book so much
Yeah, yeah,
that
you might idolize a
you're
person.
idolizing that
Yeah,
person as
yeah.
well. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
There's been a lot of challenges. It's never been difficult, but there's been a lot of challenges and conversations that have been needed to be had, but that only strengthens the
yeah.
relationship.
Oh my god,
And
uncomfortable conversations are like the best
yeah, they're
medicine.
so important, and we're in a position now where we're just so blessed because of everything that's happening. Like, I couldn't have done any of this journey without her.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
she's been grounding me the entire time. She's my personal assistant unpaid. She's my reassuring person. I'm taking her on all of these plus one activities that I'm doing. So it's not just I want to make sure that she's benefiting from this as much as I am.
I'm sure she keeps you grounded
And
as well.
yeah, she really does. And yeah,
Andy, put the phone
yeah, it's
down.
like I just put the phone down. We're watching TV. We're having dinner. I'm like, okay, good. And at the same time, I'm like, she's the first person that I call with any good news
Oh,
or any bad news. But it's like this has just happened, and she'll have my back like no one else,
Yeah.
and will really fight my case,
Yeah.
and will get. And I'm like, no, I need you to pacify me. Don't rile me up,
Yeah.
because you're gonna rile me up. But she will really, really shout to defend me when it needs to be said. But also will celebrate me like no one else has.
Yeah.
And that's what I need, is someone who's glass half empty, and she's someone who's glass half full. It's nice that
You balance each
we
other
can
out.
balance each other out. Yeah.
So good.
Yeah,
So
I'm very,
good. So
very blessed.
beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
And so what's coming next in the years coming? What can readers expect from you? What are you doing? Have you got any new projects coming out?
So currently, I have, as from September, I've actually gone down to part-time in work. So I've gone down to 3 days, which,
congratulations with all
thank
that.
you, which is really, 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 really nice after how intense the last academic year was. So that way, it allows me to focus more on writing and publishing, and also on content creation.
Yeah.
So I want to really try and prioritize that where possible. I want to try and transition into a space where I can do that, but still not have it take over my life. With my writing, The Dark That Hides Us is out in April. We've done the cover reveal obviously last week, which I loved.
So exciting.
I'm really, really excited for it. And between now and April, I need to be writing the third book, which I've just literally written like the prologue
you've already
of.
written it, haven't you?
I mean, I've written the first draft, yeah. But and that one is, I think the third book is one of my favourites. It's a lot darker. It's a lot more character led. It's a lot more.
Can you give us anything about that? I know the second one hasn't even come out yet, but is there anything you can say
about the third one?
Yeah.
In terms of the world, the stakes aren't as great as book 2. I don't think anything can get stake wise as intense as the world literally being covered in shadow, and there's only 4 kids that can stop it.
Yeah.
That book 2 is those kind of stakes.
Yeah.
But in book 3, the stakes are so internal that there is such a high level of delicacy in the characters within themselves and then between themselves. So it feels a lot more psychological, book 3.
So you're going to use your undergraduate.
It's really it comes into place a lot. There is a lot of that in book 3, and it takes a much darker tone. So that's when it starts to feel like YA crossover, because it's more mature, darker, and the storylines itself are just, I love it. I really love book 3. I love book 2. Book 2 is one of my favorites as well. But book 3 is gritty.
Do you think that's coming as you're growing up? And
I think so. I think, you know what? Even when I was younger, book 3 was always the darkest one.
Really?
Yeah, it was always that. Like, that was the dark one. That was the where we really get to experience and understand the psychosis element, Alexis's family background. Like, that was always that one.
Oh, can't wait.
So yeah, but I feel like I've made it dark as I've got older, because as I've got older, I've looked. So it was always the dark one, but now it's like dark. Whereas before it was like,
it's like Harry Potter.
Yeah, it's like as it gets darker and darker. Yeah. So that one's quite dark. So yeah, next year's gonna be me again, just focusing on writing, publishing. It's gonna be more because of the success from The Light That Blinds Us. I'm hoping that we'll do a book tour for book 2. So I really want to have like much bigger publicity for that one, because we're starting to get international foreign sales as well. So they're starting to come out this year and next year.
Oh my goodness. Are you hoping to get it done in more languages?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we've already got quite a few that are not announced yet. I think the only ones that are announced is the French one, which came out this week, and I'm going to Paris on Saturday. And also I think the Bulgarian one, but there's a few other languages and other territories that are really exciting. I'm currently going to step into negotiations for the second book deal of books 3 and 4, and maybe even something else. So
do you think you're going to carry on with this series?
Yeah, I'm not stopping until I finish the series.
Okay.
Yeah. Book 3 and 4 is getting done. It needs to be read. Those books are going to get published. So it's just about, with my agent, figuring out how we're gonna submit it. We discuss with Simon and Schuster, and then going forwards from there. But I've already got the books done, so yeah.
Busy year ahead.
Yeah, busy. Yeah, I don't stop. Yeah. But
Andy,
but it's good. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I've had a lovely time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had
a chat.
It's much more personal chat than I've ever had.
Really?
Yeah, much deeper. But I liked that. I felt really comfortable to explore those things.
Thank you for being so open as well and honest.
Yeah. No, I am on social media, aren't I? So.